Midnight departure. The distant whistle of a train pierced the silence of the night. Daniel paused, listening intently, though he knew the sound was only in his imagination. Larkspur Station had been abandoned for nearly 15 years, ever since the tragic accident that took his beloved wife Lydia's life. Yet he still found himself drawn to the dilapidated building night after night. Local teens had spread rumors about seeing mysterious lights and hearing a phantom train arrive at the dead of midnight. Most dismissed them as ghost stories meant to scare and titillate, but for Daniel, the stories stirred a faint hope in his grieving heart. Could Lydia's spirit be reaching out to him from beyond the grave? Daniel sat on a crumbling bench on the platform, his worn coat pulled tight against the autumn chill. He checked his watch as he did every night. 11:58 p.m., just 2 minutes to go. The Truth Seekers paranormal group had planted various devices around the platform, hoping to capture evidence of supernatural activity. Daniel almost hoped they wouldn't find anything. He wasn't sure he could handle confirmation of what he hardly dared to believe, or the crushing disappointment if it was merely an urban legend. The minute hand ticked forward. Daniel leaned forward in anticipation, every sense strained. As the watch struck midnight, that low, mournful whistle sounded again, distant at first but growing louder, as if an engine was approaching the abandoned station. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. Could it be? Faint lights appeared down the length of the track. They resolved into a single glowing headlamp, twin beams cutting through the night mist. The train's whistle blew once more as its bulk emerged from the darkness. Daniel stood, trembling, as the locomotive approached the platform with a hiss of brakes. This was no phantom. It was real. The train ground to a halt with a final groan of metal. For several moments, everything was still and silent. Then, with a mechanical clank, the passenger car doors swung open. Daniel inched closer, squinting at the car's interior. Shadowy silhouettes moved inside. With a start, he realized they were people, travelers from different eras based on their clothing. A conductor called "All aboard" in a distant, echoing voice. The passengers began to shuffle out, vacant expressions on their faces. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as one figure emerged. Chestnut hair swept up in a 1940s victory roll. Red lips and eyes fixed ahead unseeingly was Lydia, looking just as she had on the day of her accident. "Lydia!" Daniel cried out, staggering toward her. She didn't seem to notice, moving slowly toward the station entrance. He grabbed her shoulder and she paused, turning that blank gaze on him. There was no spark of recognition in her eyes, but it was her. His Lydia. Daniel embraced her tightly, heedless of the strangeness. She felt solid and real in his arms. "I've missed you so much, my love," he choked out through his tears. Lydia remained stiff and unresponsive for a long moment. Then she relaxed into his embrace, lifting her arms to return it. Daniel didn't question this small miracle. He had his wife back, and that was all that mattered. Lydia pulled back first, regarding him with a new awareness in her eyes. She raised a hand to caress his weathered cheek. "Daniel," she said softly. "My Daniel, I've been waiting for you." She took his hand and stepped back toward the passenger car. Daniel followed as if in a dream. The other spectral travelers avoided his gaze as he boarded with Lydia. A feeling of disquiet pierced Daniel's euphoria, but he pushed it aside. They could figure everything out later, once they were together again. The train jolted and began to move, picking up speed as it left the station. Daniel held tight to Lydia's hand. "Where are we going, my dear?" he asked. Lydia gave him a sad smile. Into the past. She led him through the passenger car, which seemed to lengthen impossibly with each step. Daniel grew uneasy as he noticed the travelers flickering like grainy film images. Their clothing and appearances changed, cycling through different eras. What was happening? The train cabin morphed into Larkspur Station as it had looked decades before, bustling and alive. Daniel froze as screams erupted from the crowd. A train was barreling down the opposite track uncontrollably fast. "No, not this," Daniel whimpered, recognizing the doomed vehicle. Lydia's train. The crash played out in horrific detail. Twisted metal, shattered glass. bloody and lifeless bodies. Daniel collapsed to his knees on the phantom train, surrounded by screaming ghosts reliving their final moments. "Why have you brought me here?" he cried out. But Lydia was gone. Daniel was alone among the dead, trapped in an endless loop of tragic memory. The scene reset again and again. Each time Daniel frantically scanned the crowd for Lydia, hoping to plead with her to release him from this nightmare. But she was eternally just out of reach, swept away in the chaos. Exhausted and despairing, Daniel had no choice but to stumble through the futile movements like the other ghosts, seeking Lydia's face in the crowd, hearing the whistle blow, bracing for the sickening impact. Over and over his soul fractured a little more. How long he remained trapped, Daniel couldn't say. Years or mere minutes could have passed in the purgatory of Larkspur Station. But one night as he scanned the crowds during yet another loop, Daniel's hollow eyes landed on a familiar face. Himself. A living, breathing version looked back at him in shock. Daniel shuddered, a spark of awareness piercing his numbness. Was this a vision of the future, he wondered, or had someone else been foolish enough to board the phantom train? Daniel focused every ounce of will on crossing the distance between them. As the train wreck commenced around him, he grabbed his doppelganger's shoulders. A jolt passed between them, and the living Daniel's eyes widened. "Turn back," Daniel urged. "This purgatory will claim you as it claimed me. Escape while you still can." The train car flickered, Lydia and the ghosts dissolving to mist. Daniel's doppelganger touched his face wonderingly and nodded. As the doors screeched open, he fled into darkness. Alone again, Daniel sank to the floor in despair. But that brief moment of connection had awakened something within him, a realization that perhaps he could find a way to save others from his fate. Each night Daniel waited, peering from the phantom train into the station, hoping to catch someone's eye and somehow warn them away from boarding. His silent screams went unheeded, but he persisted. For if he could not escape his haunting, perhaps he could stop others from sharing it. The ghostly train might continue its endless journey through purgatory, but by saving even one soul, Daniel could find some purpose in the nightmare.